Hey everyone, so if you're like me, you've probably been bombarded by Edge of Fate videos by a variety of creators over the past day or so, and a lot of these creators played different parts of the preview that they were allowed to access, and so a lot of them have different bits and pieces, and so you kind of have to go around collecting the Infinity Stones in order to have all the information. So as an endgame player, I wanted to condense everything into one video that just summarizes the main changes so that you guys do not have to worry too much about having to scour all the different corners of the internet to find all the information about the Edge of Fate. This is going to be an endgame PvE focus, so I'm not going to talk too much about PvP. Some perks, for example, I'm just going to write them off as PvP perks, and we're not going to really talk about their viability in endgame PvE because they're clearly meant for PvP content, if that makes sense. So credit-wise, these are a bunch of creators that I'm directly referencing their content in this write-up that I have here. Obviously, there's other creators whose information I indirectly reference, like Datto, but these are the ones that I'm directly referencing. There's also a Reddit user here, gifv_Kayla, so shout out to them for creating this little Reddit thread, whose kind of format I followed like a little bit when it comes to the subtopics that we're going to discuss. And I also have some personal friends as well who have been keeping track of things. Spider especially has helped me fill in the gaps here to make sure I'm not missing any essential information when I'm talking about the Edge of Fate preview. So with that out of the way, one more thing before we get started. I know my audio is going to be pretty echoey during this video. I'm currently recording in a den. I'm in the process of moving to a new place. So yeah, I wanted to get this video out though because so many people were begging me to make this video. So I really wanted to get it out as soon as possible because it is a bit of a time sensitive thing. And so yeah, I wanted to record it even though my recording circumstances are not the best right now. So let's go ahead and get started with leveling and systems. I'm going to breeze through this stuff because for the most part, there's not much you can do about it. It's just here to stay, whether you like it or not. I'm personally, I think it looks fine. But yeah, it's in terms of like meta and like, player build crafting and stuff like that. This is just kind of how things are right now. So your power has been reset down to 10. It looks like you're going to get your power up to 200 by playing the campaign or whatever it is. And then for the rest of the foreseeable future of Destiny, 200 power is going to be where you're going to sit by default, right? So that's like your powerful cap, similar to what that was before. And then every season, you're going to be able to grind for 250 additional power by doing seasonal activities, by doing basically gear beyond 200, right? And then so that's going to remain until the mid-season patch, and then at the mid-season patch for the back half of the season, the power cap is going to expand by an additional 100. And so from 0 to 200, you use enhancement cores to, infuse your gear. And then from 200 to 450 or 450 to 550, you need these new materials called unstable cores, which you will get from dismantling 200 plus gear. So in terms of cores, these are basically just going to be a special type of currency that gets removed every season, gets reset every season. And you're going to have a lot of it because if you play the game and your gear's above 200, which it will be just naturally from playing the game, you will have a lot of these cores left over. So I don't know, it's kind of an interesting way to separate the sandbox so people can't hoard their like unstable cores season after season. But I honestly think, I think people are complaining about this, but endgame player wise, you really don't need to worry about this. You're probably going to have a surplus of unstable cores, and I'm sure people will come up with farms the same way that we've been farming Idotonics for enhancement cores. You can probably do the same thing with unstable cores. Okay, the cost is going to scale with infusion delta. So if you infuse something from 200 all the way up to 550, that's going to cost a lot of unstable cores, whereas something from 200 to like 205 is not going to cost as much. Okay, the third thing I want to talk about for leveling, that's probably the most important, is that there's no more lockout on the power grind. So no longer do you need to do your pinnacle raid every week or your powerful activities every week and then they reset. You can just keep grinding as much as you want, which is, kind of like a way of removing time gating. People didn't really complain, about the pinnacle grind that much recently because it's gotten so much better. There's way more activities now, and it's a lot more forgiving. Stuff is shared across characters, so it's a lot easier now. But now for those of you that just like want to get to pinnacle or like 450 like instantly, you can kind of just play the power grind as much as you want, right? There is still like daily bonuses that reset every day. Like certain activities will give you more drops on their first clear every day, but for the most part, there's like no lockout on the power grind in the traditional sense anymore. System wise, you guys have probably seen the ammo meters that you've probably seen in some creator videos. The question I had about this is no one really tested it extensively to know for sure, but it seems like the finder brick and the RNG brick system in Destiny are going to be combined into this new meter system. So for those of you that don't know how this works, basically in Destiny there's like two ways of getting bricks outside of like manually forcing them using stuff like finishers, Aeon, Cenotaph, whatever, right? You have finder bricks, which are your helmet mods. Those are like the shiny bricks that are a little bit smaller than your average RNG RNG brick, but they're kind of guaranteed in a way, right? It's still a bit RNG, but they're kind of guaranteed. There's a counter progression system where if you get kills with a certain weapon type, it progresses this counter, and once that counter is filled up, you get a finder brick, right? Now there's also RNG bricks, right? You probably heard of heavy ammo phases, like Prelapse on his videos goes into this in great detail, but basically there are ways to get RNG bricks, and these are like the natural ammo bricks that you get from playing when you don't have any finder mods equipped, and they're quite large, right? They can be very, very large as well. And so it seems like the suggestion here seems like finder mods are going to be deprecated, and RNG bricks might just be merged with this new finder system, and you'll naturally get bricks using this meter in a predictable fashion. And anything that would have enhanced finders, like heavy ammo finder enhancements on your, on your weapons, or just additional finder mods on your helmets, stuff like that, is probably just going to be replaced with stuff that increases the rate at which your meter fills. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'm not 100% sure on this, but it certainly seems that way. And all of the language in the mods that are changing from weapon mods to armor mods, as well as the footage that I've seen, kind of indicates that this is what is taking place. So I'm personally a fan of this. As much as I like technical details and like cool subsystems that work beyond the surface, and like, they're kind of cool to learn about, and, learn how RNG manipulation works for like ammo and whatever. At the end of the day, it is probably simpler to just have one unified system for ammo, and to have it be a consistent drop thing to reduce the amount of RNG players have to go through, especially in ammo sensitive environments like day one or solo stuff. It's nice to kind of know that you're going to get a brick just because you've killed a certain number of enemies, right? So that is the ammo finder system. Let's go ahead and talk about the portal next. The portal is basically an onboarding tactic that the Destiny team has decided to use to get new players into activities that pipeline, just to make it shorter, right? So I saw people in the interview, like the journalists in the interview that were talking to Bungie's game directors, as well as some other people on Reddit and various other content creators, complaining that this portal looks like too much mobile UI like, and it's the Fortnite-ification of Destiny and whatnot, and that it's just making all these new modifiers are making things more complicated for new players than it is right now. And I would say I actually like this system. Like, obviously you can complain about the UI and whatever. I honestly think the UI is not that bad, but I actually like this system because, for the most part, right, Destiny players that are looking to play a specific activity, they know where it is, right? They know where it is on the destination screen, and we can talk about how the destination screen might be a problem because new destinations are not going to be on the map anymore, or, data was kind of suggesting that might be the case. But regardless, right, it is nice to have new players just not have to Google something and be like, what activity should I farm for X and Y, and just have that on like a specific page. The goal here is not to kind of reduce the complexity of the activity itself, or to reduce the complexity of the modifiers that might be conflating what Bungie's aims are here. I think their goal is to just shorten the avenue that it takes for a new player to get into an activity that is relevant and worth for their time, right? So if I'm a new player and like I don't want to like have to look up where the Whisper exotic mission is or whatever, right? Like, or if stuff is on a rotator, I don't want to have to like look around the map for it, right? The goal is just to open a page and be like, okay, if I do this, this is like going to be worth my time. It has something that I need, and it's like super straightforward. The problem was never in Destiny like modifier complexity, right? Like clicking a GM and then like selecting modifiers is not going to like turn new players off. The problem was actually getting the new players to the activities themselves, right? Once they get to those activities, I think the modifiers and whatever, they can kind of just ignore them, or they can click on them because they're fairly self-explanatory. But it's the activity selection, the selection itself, not the modifiers of the activity, that were a problem, right? So I think the portal is actually pretty good. For older players, I think maybe you won't care about the portal too much, but I personally will definitely see myself kind of just going into the portal and using it as like a fast way of knowing what to grind power for example. Now that the power grind is gone, I'm sure a lot of you are going to go with your day one teams in 2 groups of 3 and just grind the portal stuff. Like I can definitely see that happening, and it's definitely a lot easier than having to click through like 3 buttons on like the world map to like look for a specific thing, right? So I'm not going to complain about it. In the solo ops playlist, as well as like the regular activities playlist, apparently some sunset seasonal activities are returning, like the coil, which is nice. Those assets are some of those activities were quite enjoyable, and just seeing them on like a short rotation and knowing that Bungie's still able to use those assets instead of just having them go to rot is kind of nice. So that's good. Appears there's some new or reworked lost sectors in the mix, maybe coming back from older versions of the game, or just reworking current sectors, so that's cool as well. And then activity rewards, they're going to be more specific, right? So this is part of that thing with the portal where target farming is going to be a lot easier. stuff that you get from activities in the portal, it's literally going to tell you what kind of armor it's going to drop, the class item, helmet, whatever, or what kind of weapon it's going to drop, right? So if you need a specific thing, you can just farm for it in the portal specifically. Sounds pretty good to me. Like I said, you get a bonus for your first daily clear, so a lot of people are suggesting just do the activities that have the bonuses for the first daily clear, and then target farm for whatever you want. Reward ranks will increase based on selectable modifiers, difficulties, and performance. We talked about this already, but yeah, just cool stuff, arcadey stuff, gamey stuff. You know, I'm not like super for or against this, but you know, it sounds pretty cool. And then finally, there is apparently another difficulty above GM, which will potentially have more rewards, maybe be related to the Conqueror seal, and might have some sort of aesthetic rewards like an emblem related to it. So yeah, that's it for the portal. Now let's talk about some of the more controversial stuff here. Apparently, Prismatic is getting aspect slot nerfs on Knockout, Feed the Void, Consecration, and Stylish Executioner. All 4 of these aspects are going to be reduced to a single fragment slot, okay? Me personally, I don't think this is going to change anything, because as I've talked about before on this channel, the Prismatic fragments, none of them are like super insanely good, right? Like some of them are, don't get me wrong, some of them are like really nice to have, and they're cool and all, but like they're not the kind of meta-defining building blocks that you build things on, like, you know, on like Void Hunter or like Void Titan, you know, Orb Devourer from like Echo of Starvation. That's really good, right? That's really good, and not having access to that would be a big problem. But on Prismatic, you have stuff like, you know, Faceted Purpose is nice, but can you live without it? You definitely can, especially with the new stat rework, which we're going to talk about. You know, Faceted Protection, I mean, you know, that's going to be nice, right? That's going to be nice, and you can still have it. So a lot of the Prismatic fragment stuff, honestly, half the Prismatic fragments you can completely ignore. They're basically unused in most content. And the other half, they're nice to have, but they're almost like customizable choices you can kind of pick that are just nice to have. Their quality of life, they're not going to fundamentally change what Knockout and Consecration are capable of doing. For example, running around with 2 fragments, I don't think it's going to personally change anything. And, you know, the buffs to the melee stat and, you know, the super stat and the grenade stat and all that stuff, that's going to actually probably leave Prismatic Titan and Prismatic Hunter and Prismatic Warlock in a better place than they were before this change. So fret not. I do know Bungie is trying to kind of, you know, hit Consecration and Knockout and, you know, Stylish and these powerful aspects down peg, but it's, you know, it's not really going to do that much, to be honest. And there's probably other ways of nerfing them, or in my opinion, probably just buffing the other aspects to become more usable rather than nerfing these aspects that are obviously quite dominant in the game right now. Some activities are apparently going to be restricted to new gear. New gear is going to be stuff that's from the current season. And you can see if something is new gear or not by looking for a teal/blue colored icon in the top left of the gear. You've probably seen this in other videos, so I'm not going to really show anything on screen, but you probably know what I'm talking about. Banes are now potentially on boss combatants. So let's go ahead and take a look at an image. This is from Court over here. He posted this in the D2 Science Discord. But yeah, apparently some boss tier enemies are now going to have certain Banes on them. I don't think they're going to have every Bane on them, because a boss with Hypernova or a boss with Drain would be terrible to deal with, especially like a raid boss. But you know, so maybe they'll have some stuff like Gravity, right? Gravity is one of the new Banes that you can learn about on Court's Twitter post. I'm going to go ahead and show this on screen. You can pause the video if you're interested in looking at the new Banes. Some pretty cool stuff, right? I like these Banes. They're none of them seem like really annoying to play against. They just seem like cool little modifiers. Court posted a picture of like an oversized War Beast with the promoted Bane. I kind of like that. It was kind of cute. So that's cool, I suppose. And then the other change that I was meaning to mention in the leveling section, but I'm going to mention it here, is the damage number crunch due to the power change. So a lot of people are calling it like a crunch. All of our damage numbers are going down, and so people are saying, oh, our boss is going to be way harder to kill now. No, obviously, the way this game works at an underlying like fundamental level is that Gambit numbers, or PvP numbers, are the base values that Bungie uses to scale off of for other activities. So Gambit, you can imagine, is like your 1x multiplier, right? That is your base value. Maybe you shoot an enemy in the head with a hand cannon and you see like 10 damage, right? Or like a miner, like a red bar in the head with a hand cannon, you see 10 damage. And then raids and dungeons and all these different activities will have scalars at different levels. So maybe raids might have, I think it's like 48 times or something like that. So you shouldn't add in the head with your hand cannon, you might see 480 damage, right? So because the power is being scaled all the way back down to 10 to 200, etc., a lot of the numbers that you see, the recommended power level for all these activities is also going to scale down proportionally, right? And so the actual effective damage that we do to bosses is probably going to remain the same or very similar. So I'm going to be testing every single weapon once again in order to obtain these values, and I'm going to be able to test every single boss as well in order to obtain these values once more. And so we'll see. Bungie likes to, during these large sandbox passes where they change power levels and stuff, they like to also hit down or hit up certain weapon types and certain supers without really mentioning it in the patch notes. This has happened historically, which is why I keep such a big catalog of all these different weapons and their damage values. So we'll have to see what happens when we get there. I suppose it will be nicer dealing with smaller numbers, but it's going to be very awkward, I guess, saying, wow, instead of I'm doing 300,000 DPS, I'm now doing 3,000 DPS or 300 DPS, right? So that's going to be definitely an interesting change of like frame of reference here. Dado mentioned not having any reference numbers because the power numbers had completely changed, and so he's kind of right in that regard that it's going to be pretty awkward, I guess, looking at these new numbers and, you know, being used to millions of damage, and now we're going to have thousands probably, right? So pretty interesting stuff. And finally, there is an arms weak testing range that you guys have probably seen in a lot of this featured content. I'm probably still going to need Templar unless the arms weak testing range has a boss that is a boss level combatant and also has a bottom of screen health bar that can be measured using a pixel measure like Destiny Damage Tracker. Templar obviously is one such boss, and so I haven't seen a boss with a bottom of screen health bar, and so I'm probably going to use Templar because I'm still testing for chunking. It still exists in Destiny. Some weapons do more damage to the health bar than they do on the wipe screen or visually on your screen, so I will probably still need to use Templar for these bosses. Okay, so that is the leveling and system stuff out of the way. Let's move on to legendary armor. So legendary armor, there's now a tier system from 1 to 5. Our current armor, according to Dado and according to a couple other people, is going to translate approximately over to tier 3, right? So tier 3, I believe, is like around like up to like 65 total stats, right? And then tier 4 is like 65 and a little bit higher than that. So our old armor is probably going to be around tier 3.5-ish, right? I'm not sure what they're going to do to the stat distributions because obviously current armor has way more varied stat distributions. You're capable of getting all 6 stats to be pretty much even, whereas the new armor is explicitly going to be spiky, right? So the new armor, I'm going to kind of skip points here, but you have 3 spikes on new armor. You have the primary, you have the secondary, and you have the tertiary spike. And the primary, the ratio of distribution of these stats is going to be 3 to 2 to 1 approximately, right? There's some deviation here, but it's going to be approximately 3 to 2 to 1, right? So what this means for armor farming is that it's going to be a lot easier to farm for armor. You're basically just going to be looking for the correct archetype, which we'll talk about in a second, and a high tier, right? Because you want high total stats, right? Whereas before, the distribution was really what mattered. Even if you had like a 64 total armor roll, which is not perfect, you'd want like 68, which was the the previous max. If it had a really good distribution and very little wasted, that would be very good. However, nowadays, because the distribution is explicitly a form of, it's in the game as, in the form of archetypes, you don't really need to actually focus too much on distribution. Now you can just focus on the actual tier of the armor, and you can focus on the archetype as well, which you can control to some degree, right? So that's going to make armor farming, in my opinion, a little bit easier, okay? So that's number 1. Number 2 is the tiering system, right? So the tiering system, apparently, the decision is not finalized yet, I think, but you're going to have the highest possible stat totals on tier 4 and tier 5, obviously, right? But I'm not sure whether tier 4, the upper band of tier 4, will reach the same maximum as tier 5. That is like unknown yet. For now, the tooltip says that tier 5 will have higher stat totals than tier 4, but it's entirely possible that tier 4 will reach upward into that tier 5 range. So again, uncertain on tier 4 having max totals yet. There's some stat tuning available on tier 5. You can either put -5 in one stat in exchange for putting +5 in another stat, or you can give +1 tier 3 lowest stats, which are going to be the 3 non-spiked stats. And basically this is a masterwork 6. Okay, so you can still masterwork armor. All armor has like energy, right? And you don't get more energy by masterworking anymore. Instead, every single time you masterwork armor, you get 1 stat to your 3 lowest stats, right? So to your 3 non-spiked stats, you get 3 free stats, 1 in each of them, right? You can do it up to 5 times, which means you'll have 5, you'll have your 3 spikes, and you'll have 5, 5, 5 in the other 3 armor stats, okay? And so stat tuning on 5, if you choose to do this, you'll have 6 in your 3 lowest stats. So it'll be like a masterwork 6, okay? So Bungie does say, every stat point matters, but I doubt, this is going to be a big deal to people. I think they're probably going to go for the -5 +5, especially because you can control stats that are not within kind of your archetype and kind of get rid of them because you don't need them. Okay. Let's talk about the stat rework. Okay, the stat rework, this is a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Scaro video here, and we're going to go to the timestamps that show us what each of these stats do. Okay, so let me go ahead and full screen here. Sorry, Scaro, I'm gonna go and mute you. And let's go ahead and look at these summary tables. Okay, so in my opinion, I do think that almost every stat is pretty good. Whereas before, mobility was largely ignored on non-hunter classes. Even hunter, if you're playing like combination blow, you really don't need mobility. Resilience was like a must-have. Recovery, mostly ignored in PvE if you have a build that has sustain, which most builds do have sustain these days. You have discipline, which is, grenade builds are not, super crazy right now. And then you have intellect, which is mostly ignored. And then you have strength, which is like situational, right? So really, the big stat was resilience. Now with this new change, I would say definitely an improvement. Definitely an improvement. I wouldn't say not perfect, but definitely an improvement. Okay. So health is probably the most underwhelming stat right now. You get more health per orb if you have the health stat. Flinch resist doesn't really matter in PvE. And then you have basically the old recovery stats, right? So you have, it's like recovery and resilience combined. You have your shield recharge rate, which is increased, and then you have shield health. So you get a little bit more health, right? So the health stat, in my opinion, is probably the most underwhelming. We're going to talk about the other stats in a second here, but there's a lot of stuff in the sandbox that can kind of supplement what's already going on here. And while I do think the health per orb can be kind of nice, even just having it at 100, for example, if you have a heavy-handed build on Titan or Hunter, every single time you get a kill, you're basically guaranteed to get an orb, and then you get plus 70, right? So that can be kind of nice, but this stuff is largely not really relevant in PvE in the current sandbox. Definitely I could see it being relevant in PvP though. But let's move on to the crazier stuff. So let's see the melee stat. The melee stat, I mean, the cooldown stuff, don't worry about too much. Apparently, most of your stats are going to be base behavior, the current 100. So currently 100 strength, I suppose, your cooldown will be like at 0, right? Will be equivalent to melee being at 0 or something like that. I know this is the case for certain stats. I'm not 100% sure if it's the case for like melee and grenade. But the big thing here is the damage increase. For 200 points in the melee stat, you can get a 30% damage increase to your melee. Now this is a bit interesting because you'll notice that this stat is pretty much the same as the super and the grenade stat, just with slightly different number tuning, right? So if you go to the grenade stat goes up by 65%. And then if you go to the super stat goes up at 200 by, oh, hold on, let me go to the table here, by 45%. So if we take a look here, melee 30, grenade, was it? I think it was 65 or something like that. And then you have super, which is 45. So that really shows that Bungie is concerned about melee damage buffs. I mean, maybe they're right to be concerned given what we've done with melee stacking over the past couple years, but this kind of shows Bungie's priorities and their idea of what is the strongest stuff in the game. So first of all, 45% on supers is, I don't think I need to tell you, that's kind of strong, right? It's stronger than limit break. And you can have it permanently all the time, right? So that sounds pretty good. But the big thing that I want to point out here that I'm not sure if Bungie really thought about this is that grapple melee damage is counted as melee and as grenade damage. And if you look at these two, we'll talk about how archetypes are going to restrict this. This is insane. This is insane. This is 1.3x multiplied by 1.65x. Which is insane. And we're going to have Shield Crush this season as well. So I don't know, unless something changes about how grapple melee is coded, or they address this or patch this in some way, grapple meleeing is going to be insane next season. Insane next season. Okay, absolutely insane. So I do want to point that out. As for some of the other stuff, apparently this super stat here, so not only is it probably going to affect your passive gain like intellect did, but it says energy gained, all energy gained. So obviously stuff like Thresh, anything that has like scalars like Thresh and bad juju and stuff like that, where it gives you chunk super energy, obviously going to be affected by the super change. But what I'm also curious about is active super gain. So active super gain, if you guys are not familiar, I have a video called, what is the fastest way to get your super in Destiny 2 or whatever, where I explore active super gain. And basically what this does is when you deal damage to a target in Destiny or take damage from a target in Destiny, you get a certain amount of super. And so I don't know if that counts as an energy gain source for this, because if it does, getting essentially a tripled return on your super generation rate is going to be insane. It's going to be insane. You're going to have like 3 or 4 supers per phase if you just chuck on an area denial or anything that is remotely compatible with super generation farming, which again, you can find out those sources from my video. Okay, so insane stuff. I'm gonna have to test active generation scaling with this new super stat when the DLC drops. But yeah. Okay, next up we have the new class stat. This stat seems pretty good, but the biggest thing I want to talk about is on Hunter. So I'm sure if you guys know, there is a Hunter build involving combination blow. There's various variants of it, but the basic cycle of it goes melee, into dodge, into melee, into dodge, into yada 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 yada, right? And the big thing is you can dodge basically every second or two using this, gameplay loop, and 40 overshield on every dodge. Seems pretty good, right? But besides that, I would say the class ability stat, because class abilities in general are just not very powerful, outside of the overshield benefit, I would say this is not really a big deal. I would say probably it goes every stat, it goes all the stats. So we're talking like super, melee, weapon, grenade. Maybe grenade's like a bit underwhelming, right? So it goes most of the stats, and then it goes like, I don't know, grenade, and then it goes class, and then it goes health, right? I think health is the most underwhelming one, but these three are insane, by the way, insane. And we haven't even talked about weapon yet. So let's go to the weapon stat. I guess weapon is not like super insane, right? I guess it's not as crazy as like, what the grenade and melee could be with grapple melee. It's not as game warping, right? But this is pretty nice, and then obviously this can be pretty nice as well. So it's just free damage boosts, right? And I'm assuming surges are staying in the game, so this is pretty nice, I guess. We're gonna talk about now how you can combine these, right? So there's certain restrictions on how these stats are going to work, and I'm gonna talk about that in a brief moment here. Okay. So let's go ahead and exit Scaro's video here. And the next thing I want to talk about is the archetypes for focusing, right? So my friend AOC here, she's made a little list of the different kind of armor archetypes that exist. And basically armor archetypes, they dictate your primary, your secondary, and then a random tertiary stat, where we talked about it's a 3 to 2 to 1 ratio, right? Now you'll notice here is that there are, 6 stats in the game, and all 6 stats have potentially, 6 different pairings as their primary and secondary, right? And so in theory, there should be 36 different archetypes. There should be 36 different archetypes because, you can have 6 different in the primary and you can have 6 different in the secondary. Or I guess you can't have 2 of the same. So I guess it would be 5, sorry. So there should be 30 archetypes in the game, right? But you might notice here, in the preview at least, when they were looking at Rahul, there are only 6. There are only 6, right? And basically what this means is each and every primary stat focus only has a specific unique pairing. You'll notice here that every single thing in the primary is only listed once, and every single stat in the secondary is only listed once as well. So if you want to have a health primary focus, you need to have a class secondary focus. There is no other archetype here that has class as its secondary. So there are explicitly created pairings here, okay? And so the interesting thing here is, for example, when I talked about having grenade and melee at 200 each, there is no grenade and melee pairing here, right? You'll notice melee health, and you'll notice grenade super, right? So there is no grenade and melee pairing here. So getting both to 100 is going to be very hard, if not impossible, right? Because based on the stats that we've seen, you have 200 in each stat, that's 1200 total, and it seems like you're only able to get, with like Masterworks and all this stuff added, maybe 400, like 450 max total. And so not having the ability to have grenade and melee as your primary and secondary is really going to hurt your ability to try and get both to 200. So maybe that's Bungie's way of kind of tampering with the balance here. But again, pretty interesting. I guess these maybe they'll release more archetypes in the future. I'm not sure. Maybe that's something they could do season on season. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but at least for now, this is a way of kind of, ensuring that certain OP pairings are not possible. I'm not sure if that's actually something that they were going for when it comes to, like, for example, super and weapons would be a crazy pairing for a DPS armor set, but they don't have super and weapons paired together. And then melee and grenade, like we talked about, would be a crazy thing to have, but they don't have it, right? Or even on Hunter, like class and melee together would be nice. But again, they don't have it. So kind of interesting. In my opinion, archetype wise, I'm probably not going to be caring about this. I'm probably not going to be caring about this, but you could do like melee health on a Hunter and, try and go for like the health on orb pickups with the heavy-handed thing, which could be nice. And then this is probably going to be one of the ones for damage or, for DPS with abilities, for burst damage or for grapple melee damage. I assume this is probably going to be for like boss DPS. And then for the other stuff, I mean, I don't know. You have, I mean, I can see grenade super as well. I don't know. It's going to be interesting for sure. We're going to have to see eventually what ends up happening in terms of like, are you actually able to get, for example, weapons and melee to like 200 at the same time, despite the fact that they cannot coexist on an archetype, right? That's going to be a question that's going to be on everyone's minds, and we're going to see if it's possible, you know, even with like the best rolled armor and stuff like that, and the, you know, the tier 11 or whatever you want to call it, the tuning mod. Okay, so that is it for the stat rework. Old stat revamp, apparently our resilience is going to act as if it's tier 10. So we're going to have 230 HP, which is the same amount of total HP that you would have if you have tier 10 resilience right now, but none of the content creators commented on the DR. And so it is unknown whether we are going to go into content with 0% DR by default and have to get our DR from other sources that are not stats, or if we're going to have the base 30% DR, which came with 100 resell. So I'm not sure if anyone has touched on this, not that I've seen, no content creators have really touched on this, so it is a bit of a question mark as of right now. We'll see what happens, but if it is true that we are going to have 0% DR, then classes like Solar Warlock are going to be struggling, let's just say, a little bit. Okay, recovery is equivalent to 100 at base, and although this doesn't affect most people, it does affect speedrunning. Speedrunners like having 100 mobility for two reasons. For going up to tall objects, you know, jumping on high heights, you know, higher. It affects your mountaintop jump ability, affects your regular jump ability, and then also having burdened walk speed. Burdened movement speed is highly affected by mobility. So when you're running with a relic or running with a core or something like that, your movement speed is very, very much tied to your mobility stat. And so having 30 at base and not being able to run 100 mobility as well as surges at the same time, because apparently these mods are on your boots. So not being able to run surges and enhanced athletics at the same time to have 100 mobility will definitely affect some encounters and strategies. And if it is actually diminishing returns, then it is possible that you will not even be able to reach 100 mobility anymore, because people are theorizing that it's going to go 30, 60, 80, 90 with 3 mods. So difference between 90 and 100 is not really a big deal, but you know, not having 100 mobility or just having to have boot mods for it might be kind of annoying. But yeah, I can see maybe they would have maybe some PvP concerns if everybody was at 100 mobility all the time, without, you know, speccing into anything, right? So maybe that was their concern, I'm not sure, but obviously missing out on 100 mobility will affect some speedrunners and some speedruns for sure, but most people, you know, it doesn't really matter. Okay, next up we have armor set bonuses. So you guys have probably seen, if you have 2 pieces of a specific armor family, right, from the same armor set, or if you have 4 pieces, there are different bonuses. These 2 stack together, and from what Benny has said in his videos, you can actually grab a 2-piece from one family, and you can grab a 2-piece from another family, and you can have both of the tier 1 set bonuses at the same time. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at what is currently available from the armor set bonuses, and let's take a look. So the first one is the Bushido one. I think this is the one that people are paying the most attention to because it says final blows with freshly drawn or reloaded weapons heal you. Okay, and unfortunately I have a little bit of bad news, because the healing that I saw in the clips that I was watching of people using Bushido armor, at least I think, the healing was not that significant, right? It was like a little bit of healing. I'm not talking like Vanguard Vindication, like 10 HP level healing, but it was not that much. It was not that much. So it's definitely helpful, right? And definitely like will maybe make a difference from time to time, but it's not like Soul Drinker forbearance healing. At least I don't think it was, right? And then this can be kind of nice, but the weapon types they chose here obviously not that great. Shotgun final blows, you're not getting those that often with most shotgun types anyway. Bow, I mean, I guess if you're like a, you know, non-denouement user, could be good. Trinity user, Le Monarch user could be good, right? And then sword final blows, I mean, most people don't use sword for roaming content, especially in survivability focused content. So, you know, I mean, I guess if you're like an ergo user or something like that, and that's part of your build, that could be good. But for the most part, people are using swords for boss DPS and not for roam content. So yeah. And then this reduced incoming damage. As usual, Bungie does not include DR numbers, so we're gonna have to test that for ourselves. It's really gonna depend on how much DR, right? A lot of the questions I'm gonna be asking over the next little bit here when we look at armor set bonuses, weapons, etc., is gonna be how much is this number? Because that is going to affect our perception of it and how good it is compared to what we currently have, right? So yeah, this is just kind of some survivability armor, but I don't think it's like super meta shifting. I will talk about my opinion on armor set bonuses as a whole in the near future after we visit all 4 of these. But again, Bushido, I think it's a little bit overhyped, not potentially as good as people think. I might be mistaken on this healing thing, but at least from the footage I saw, it didn't look like a lot. Okay, so next up we have Aeons. or the Ion, something like that. Speed booster actually has a little bit of damage resist built into it. It's 15% damage resist. I'm not sure if it stacks with the amplified damage resist, but this is kind of like, I wrote it in my notes on the spreadsheet that I'll show you guys in a second, but it's basically like really budget protective light, right? So after you activate Force Converter, which a lot of people are using grenade launchers all the time, right? You have Force Converter kind of stored, right? And so afterwards, if you're ever at crit health, if you sprint at all, which, you know, people are sprinting all the time in this game, you get speed booster immediately. You don't need to charge it up. You get speed booster immediately for a short duration. And so it's basically like a little bit of 15% DR for a short duration after, you know, getting this requirement, which it's not, you know, it's on the edge of being janky to activate and being easy to activate. So I think if you're using a grenade launcher, it should be fairly straightforward to activate Force Converter. But yeah, I do find myself, even when I'm amplified, I don't get speed booster unless I'm out of combat. So it kind of, I guess, depends on the person, but I do think this will be a little bit janky and probably not that useful. Okay, so that's the Ion stuff, Aeon stuff. Tech Sec Gauntlets. This is very situational, right? This is like deconstruct situationality, right? So yeah, you know, if you have a weapon that you use deconstruct on, this is probably going to be like, you know, similar like use cases. I don't think it's going to be that strong. Most people do not run deconstruct weapons for really anything these days. And I don't know, if we ever get like a GM boss or a raid boss that's like a vehicle, then I could see this being useful on like Arbalest or Izzy or something. I wrote that down on my spreadsheet, but yeah, not that crazy. And then this is also not that crazy. We've had effects before like kinetic impacts, which I believe is basically going to be the same thing. Disorienting kinetic shockwave is basically equivalent to 1 kinetic tremor shockwave, right? And it is just not that great. It's not that great. It's kind of whatever. Obviously, it's nice to have, given that it's coming from armor and, you know, not from something else. But given Bungie's language and their use and their creativity in these armor set bonuses, I'm willing to bet that they are going to make armor set bonuses that are a lot stronger than this in the future, even for offensive play, not defensive play. So, you know, not super hyped about that. And then finally, last discipline Greaves. Okay, so final blows with primary ammo weapons, grant your primary weapons temporarily increase reload speed. It's kind of whatever, right? This is basically just like, it's like a loader mod. Like it's, I don't know. The Bushido stuff is obviously a lot more impactful than this. And then picking up an orb of power grants special ammo progress. If this said heavy ammo progress, you know, I'd be pretty sold on it. But special ammo is, you know, pretty easy to come by in this game. So I'm not super hyped about this. It's kind of whatever. You have special finishers, you have Seno, you have seasonal finisher mods, etc., etc. So this is kind of whatever. But you know, I think the armor set bonuses that we've been shown so far, none of them are like insanely strong, but the range of gameplay that they cover, right? The range of gameplay that they cover, from finishers to orbs to reload speed to damage, etc., or like shockwaves and whatever, the range of creativity that Bungie is showing with these armor set bonuses proves to me that, at least in theory, in the future, when we get maybe some more pinnacle level armor sets, maybe from raids or dungeons or whatever, I would love to see Bungie try and implement new armor set bonuses on like all the old raid armor. But you know, obviously that's a bit of a stretch. But if they do, right, you know, I could see them implementing some actually like pretty strong and game warping stuff, right? Given the range of stuff that they've already implemented. So armor set bonuses, they're cool and all, but I don't think the ones that we currently know about are like insanely strong. Okay. So we've talked about legendary armor. So yeah, I'm gonna make a summary, by the way, after this is all done, because I'm gonna be talking for a while. Okay, next up we have exotic armor. I'm not gonna lie to you, I can show you clips of this stuff, right? And it's like cool and all, but none of it is game changing, right? You're probably gonna take an exotic class item or a fundamental exotic like Sanguine, Seno, Speaker Sight, whatever, on Warlock, etc. This is basically the Thor exotic, right? You can recall your hammer to your hand. If you recall it at the right time, when it makes the ding noise, it makes like a, you know, a trail of like flames, or like kind of hits additional enemies in between you and your hammer, which is fine and all, but this is just too slow paced, right? I don't think I need to tell you this, but it's too slow paced for endgame content, right? And it doesn't fix the problems that Solar Titan has compared to Prismatic, right? So yeah, let's keep going. Eunoia. This just makes your Hellion do more damage the longer it travels, and also like makes Sunbracer globs, like Touch of Flame Sunbracer globs, which is nice and all. I don't think it's really going to matter. For DPS purposes, if a boss is really far away, you're going to be on Sanguine. 10% weapon boost is a lot better than having your Hellion do more damage. And then in terms of like, you know, ad clear stuff, like it's a Hellion. It shoots like once a second. It's like not great, right? So yeah, we're going to pass on Eunoia. And then Moirai, this one is actually not that bad. I thought it was definitely like, okay. I want to pause here and just say, like, a lot of these exotics, they feel very exotic. They look very exotic. I would say Yunoya is probably the most disappointing one. But they're definitely very like exotic and cool and quirky and very like roleplay-esque exotics. And so I think people will have a lot of fun using them, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing for sure. But I'm an endgame content creator, and none of this stuff I think is going to be dethroning anything in endgame content. So again, I can show you this. You know, you throw a tangle, and then whenever you make a tangle, you can threaded spike it, and then your spike, when it comes back to you, it'll actually pick up the tangle, and then you can redeploy the tangle, and then it's just basically like tangle maxing. It's tangle maxing, and you know, if you got the spinny tangles, right, it's good for chaining those, right? But in terms of like endgame content, you know, yeah, it's best on Strand Hunter, and Strand Hunter is one of the weaker subclasses in endgame content. In terms of exotic armor, a lot of people are asking, do we need to regrind our exotic armor? It doesn't look like it. Exotic armor looks like it's going to be, first of all, it's going to have its stats converted. Obviously, I think the majority of the grinding, okay, I'll probably talk about this at the end of the video, but I'll touch on it now. The majority of the regrinding that will have to take place when it comes to armor is if you have stats that are converted into stats that you don't care about, right? So like, let's say Resil is like a really important stat, and it gets converted into a stat that you don't care about. Oh, I should probably go over stat conversions. I don't have them listed in this write-up, but if you guys look them up, you'll probably find them, right? But it's pretty obvious, like, you know, discipline goes to grenade. I think it's like mobility goes to weapons, and then everything else is fairly straightforward, right? So let's actually do like a little write-up real quick, right? So I've been told it's like mobility goes to weapons, resilience goes to, I think it's health, recovery goes to class, discipline goes to grenade, intellect goes to super. I almost called it super there. And then obviously strength goes to melee, right? So let's say resilience, which is the most important stat in the game right now in endgame PvE, goes to health, which is one of the most underwhelming stats in endgame PvE in this coming change. We have a lot of resilience armor, right? And so you probably have a lot of exotic armor that's resilience focused, and maybe you're like, I don't, care about health stat, and so you might have to regrind because of that. But when we say that the regrinding is kind of unneeded, we're referring specifically to stat totals, right? So exotic armor right now currently goes up to 71, and most people have exotics that are looking in the 66 to 68 range, which is going to be somewhere around tier 3.5, right? So even if there's no conversion and no boost given to your exotic proportionally to match the current tier system, there's still probably going to be around tier 3.5. I don't know if like tier 5 exotic armor is ever going to be a thing. I don't think anyone has mentioned that, but don't worry too much about regrinding unless you care about different stats. But good news for you, everyone is getting 20 vouchers. Yippee! 20 vouchers, 20 coupons, 20 cash coupons to use, I believe, at Rahul or Ada, one of them, and you'll be able to focus with a specific archetype of whatever new stats that you want. So pretty cool stuff here. Regrinding, not super needed unless you care about, class reassignment thing, stat reassignment thing. Class items apparently are going to be retrofitted with stats that make sense for the like the armor perk that you have, right? So maybe like Syntho, right? A Syntho class item will automatically have like melee as one of its stats, right? And apparently these will be retrofitted to match what other exotic armor is like, because if you guys are not aware, class items are also going to have their own stat distributions now. They're also going to be active contributors to the stats. They're also going to have like that 3-2-1 thing going on. And so yeah, you will need to regrind for all of your legendary class items, because right now I'm assuming they're going to be useless and they're not going to have any of their stats converted, given that all of them are 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 and everything. Okay. And then finally, I mentioned this already, but at Rahul, right? And for any, I think, focusable drop right now that you would use a ghost mod on, you can focus specific archetypes. So, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. But if you want to focus like, I don't know, like brawler or something, right? You want some brawler armor, you can put that on your ghost, and then you can go to Rahul and be like, yo, I want brawler armor. And then he'll give you a brawler focused sun bracers or whatever, right? So yeah, that's just an example, exotic armor. Next up, we have legendary weapons. So legendary weapons, a lot of people are talking about the tier system and all these, gold icons, and look at all these enhanced stuff. I honestly think legendary weapons are not that important, right? The changes, right? Enhanced origin on tier 5, we don't know if any of the current enhanced origin traits are going to be really strong, but if they are, then tier 5 will be worth it, because enhanced origin is the main thing that you get from a tier 5 weapon, right? So tier 4 to tier 5, the main thing is enhanced origin. There's like aesthetic stuff too, right? You get an ornament and you get like the confetti, like the on kill effects or whatever, but the main thing is actually affecting gameplay is going to be enhanced origin. We don't know how strong any of these are right now. I'm going to assume that most of them are not going to be that strong. They look like mostly like duration increases, like the same way that, enhanced perks are. You get like +1 second or whatever. So it's kind of whatever, right? The other thing that you get, that's new, I would say the most important things are, besides enhanced origin, is enhanced mods. Okay, so enhanced mods, we don't really know that much about what they do right now, especially when compared to regular mods. So I'm not 100% sure on what's going on here. But the mods, at least the enhanced ones, looked mostly seasonal. So if you think of the stuff that they've been trying right now with Episode Heresy, you have like Power of Ambition, stuff like that, Willbreaker Munitions, stuff like that. Pretty cool, right? You have like the DOT effect that people have been using, for example, on what is it, on Psychopomp or on Temptation's Hook, for example. You know, Sutek has cleared solo Ultimatum Prophecy using, you know, Power of Ambition, I believe, Temptation's Hook. So, you know, it definitely has some use in endgame content. And some of these mods look potentially really strong, and we're going to look into that in just a second here, okay? This is a spreadsheet that was created by Fallout Plays, so shout out to him. It does miss a couple weapons here and there, and so me and Spider updated and added a bunch of perks and weapons that are missing from this spreadsheet. And also I added a bunch of notes and annotated it as well. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off dark mode here. Sorry, a little mini flashbang here on the edges because it is a bit of an eyesore when I'm not on dark mode. So let's go ahead and start with weapon perks. Weapon perks that are being added to the game right now, at least as far as we know. There are a total of 9 of them, and let's go over them. Build to Blast, this gives you PvP stats when you have some defensive 3.0 effects, PvP perk. Transcendent Moment, this basically gives you PvP stats. I'm sure it is intended to be also a PvE perk, but these stats that it gives to you are basically useless in PvE. So I'm gonna say it's a PvP perk. Binary Orbit. This is basically, it reminds me of Desperate Measures or Paracausal Affinity in some way. Actually, yeah, it really reminds me of Paracausal Affinity. Is this not just Paracausal Affinity? We'll need to see the value. A lot of these notes are going to say need to see value. But yeah, this literally just looks like Paracausal Affinity to me. So I guess it's like the opposite though. Yeah, Binary Orbit, Paracausal Affinity, kind of makes sense. Yeah, so it's like the opposite. Okay, Impromptu Ammunition. I think this is the only perk that I'm potentially interested in. Final Blows increase ammo meter progress from all sources for a short time. Obviously, ammo meter progress is a big deal, right? Especially for heavy. So this could be good, right? This could be like, we don't have that many like ammo increasing perks in this game. So something like a lead from gold in like a different form like this could be good, right? And it is on some decent weapons right now, I believe. So we'll talk about weapons in a second. I just wanted to go over perks so that when you guys see the weapons, you'll understand why the perks are good / bad, okay? Proximity Power, this is one of 2 stats that increases a stat on kills / damage. I think temporary stat increases, especially kill-based ones, are a little worse than just build crafting into having that stat at all times. And so this is kind of whatever, especially given that with most melee spam builds, you're not really going to be killing stuff with your weapons, and you're mainly going to be, you know, killing stuff, you know, with your melee. So I don't know if this specifically refers to the weapons final blows or your final blows. If it's any final blows, then I can see having like a 1-2 punch shotgun or a rocket sidearm or whatever, and just holding it out and just getting free melee bonus could be good, right? So there's that. Next up, we have Blast Distributor, which I'm going to talk about as a pairing here. Dealing splash damage grants a bonus to the grenade stat. This would be nice as like an origin trait, right? But it's an actual perk. And so usually when you're dealing explosive damage in conjunction with a grenade, you are usually looking at something like a rocket or a grenade launcher. And on those weapons, you want a reload perk and you want a damage perk, right? You want a DPS perk. And unfortunately, this is neither of those things. Right? And so it's kind of a waste of a perk slot in my opinion, when it comes to dealing damage. Obviously you could say it's potentially useful on like a rocket sidearm or something, because that's more of like a roam thing, and you could have it in the first column with like a classic splash perk in the second column, but in my opinion there's probably better ways of using your perk slots. It also depends on how much the bonus is, right? If the bonus is like 100, maybe we're talking. If the bonus is like 30 or 50, different story, right? Okay, Burning Ambition. This is basically like, I don't know. It's like a Lord of Wolves exotic perk. It's kind of like Tommy's Matchbook, right? It's basically you deal damage to targets and it slowly scorches them, right? But in Dado's video, it took 13 pulse bursts to ignite a target. And we don't even know if he had Ember of Ashes on. So if he did have Ashes on, it would take even longer normally, right? That's pretty terrible. And there's some like machine guns that get this, like Unwavering Duty gets this. But unless this is hit-based, right? So again, you've probably been aware, but there's different perks in Destiny that are hit based, and then there's some weapons in Destiny that are mag % based, right? And so if it's hit based, then on a machine gun, it could potentially be okay, right? Actually, I just realized this is on a target. So on a machine gun, it's probably pretty terrible, actually. Never mind. Ignore that. So if it's mag % based, then if this is ever on like a solar area denial, solar.ad, could be really good. Could be really good if it's mag % based, as we've seen with attrition orbs and other perks like that. But for now, you know, doesn't look great. If it's like kinetic tremors and, you know, it's really, really good on like a sniper when it's enhanced, maybe that'll be good. But we have to see whether it's mag percent based or if it's actually like hit based and it varies based on the weapon type. Okay. Next up, we have Reaper's Tithe, which doesn't have a perk icon here, but you know, it does exist. I've seen it on different weapons. This is basically, yeah, it's like somewhere between Rampage and Killing Tally. It's just a neutral perk, pretty boring stuff. No idea how much it's going to stack. Hopefully it stacks, you know, higher than 30% or something like that. But I assume it's just going to be another Rampage, Killing Tally, like whatever perk. Okay. And finally, we have Sharp Harvest. Sharp Harvest is basically like Relentless Strikes, except for instead of giving you back your sword's ammo, you get special ammo. I don't know how much ammo this is going to be, but yeah, I don't really see this as being like super crazy useful. Could be useful with like Horseman and like a Horseman rotation, or with like another burst special weapon that is very ammo hungry. But for the most part, I don't think this is going to be super useful. So all in all, perk summary, I'm interested in impromptu ammunition, but none of these are going to be S tier perks, or even A tier perks, or maybe even B tier perks, to be honest. Most of them are not very good and or pretty bad. Okay, next up, let's go to the new weapons. So we have a bunch of new weapons here. These are only the ones that we know about. There's probably more, and some of these weapons we have almost nothing when it comes to information. Okay, so let's start from the top. We have an adaptive pulse rifle called Last Thursday. It's a strand pulse. Basically, this competes with Relentless, which is a high impact pulse from the current Right of the Nine activities. And Relentless is better. Relentless is better. It has basically double damage perks, double splash-ish perks. This has a bunch of like whatever nonsense in the first column. I guess, you know, demo is like whatever, that's fine. Rapid hit, whatever, that's fine. And then it has Dragonfly and, you know, Hatchling and stuff like that. I don't know. It's a better archetype than Relentless, but the perk diff is pretty big. So I don't think anyone is going to be using this in PvE. Giver's Blessing is a rapid kinetic auto. I think this is pretty decent. It is a Chroma Rush replacement. Chroma Rush is also a rapid fire kinetic auto, but this has a much more appealing first column than Chroma Rush does. Chroma Rush has like sub, which is, you know, that's about as good as it gets. This thing has Shoot Salute, it has Demo, it has Rewind, it has Impromptu. 4 perks that are better than probably everything that Chroma Rush has in the first column. And then Splicer Surge is, you know, it's kind of situationally useful, I suppose, origin trait, because it requires you to stay on the weapon for so long. But yeah, KT, and then a bunch of this stuff. So not too bad, not like an amazing primary or anything like that, but probably a replacement for Chroma Rush and Breakneck and, you know, stuff like that. Faustus Decline, or Faustus Decline. This looks like a PvP weapon for the most part. I mean, the perks kind of certainly indicate that way. It's another Rhyme Stealer Headstone sidearm, except it's a lightweight. And while I do like lightweights, Liminal and Peace Bond are both technically better archetypes, even if they might feel worse to some people, and have a wider variety of potentially more useful perks than Rhyme, including stuff like Kill Clip, etc. Next up, we have Mint Retrograde. This is a rocket-assisted pulse. So this is one of the new archetypes that I was talking about. I've been told that this one has very low ammo reserves, but appears to do very good burst damage. When I saw the rocket pulse in action, I'm not gonna lie to you, rocket sidearms seem very natural, and when you shoot them, they feel like they're like a weapon that could exist in real life, right? But the rocket pulse is just, something about them is just off to me. And I mean, I don't really care, because, you know, it's a video game, but it just looks weird. I don't know. Rocket pulse, like a rocket projectiles coming out of a pulse rifle. I don't know, very Craftoning-esque. Which I guess they're trying to embrace, like they've talked about. They want to embrace that kind of philosophy in their game a bit more, especially with like Prismatic and stuff. But just looks weird. Just looks weird. I don't know why. It just looks weird. Okay. So needs DPS testing, but the perks that they gave to this thing, I mean, usually the first candidate, the first representative of every new archetype in the game is usually pretty bad, right? So this is, you know, the perks are kind of whatever. Like this is pretty bad, this is whatever, you know, this is pretty bad, this is kind of maybe whatever, honestly. So you're looking at these two, probably mostly this guy, right? It's if this is going to be used for damage, which I think it's going to be. Well, it's going to try to be. That's what it's trying to do, I should say. So it's probably like Envious Honing, you know, stuff like that. Envious Bait. We'll see. Yeah, they gave it like DPS perks, so we'll see. We'll do some DPS testing when it comes out. You have Quan Nihilus 2. This is just a budget eminence. Yeah, that's the best way I can put it. It's an adaptive frame strand SMG, which is worse than lightweight, you know, similar RPM, same RPM, but worse damage per bullet. And in terms of your actual perks here, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. These are just like PvP perks, to be honest. And then you have Slice. You have Slice, you have Hatchling, you have like Dragonfly, kind of like whatever, right? It's a budget eminence. Next up, we have Mercury A, which is the first of a new archetype called the High Impact Longbow, which is pretty interesting. For those of you that don't really have a reference for this bow is basically going to feel like Wishender. Okay, Wishender has a similar draw time and also has a similar overpenetrating effect. And so the question that I have with this bow that will decide whether or not it's good or just okay is, does Enhanced Kinetic Tremors? Enhanced Kinetic Tremors on a bow only requires 2 hits. to trigger the shockwaves. And so does enhanced kinetic tremors count the over penetrating hits? So if you hit 2 enemies back to back through each other, will that instantly generate shockwaves? Right? It's a good question. Now, it's not very often that you're going to over penetrate and hit 2 targets at the same time, but will certainly make this bow more exciting to use. And then obviously attrition orbs is a mag percent based perk, right? And obviously bows have very small mag sizes. They have a 1 mag size, right? And so this could be an orb printer on certain targets, right? So pretty cool stuff. I've been looking for like an attrition orbs, like explosive head bow. I think some solar bow has that right now, but yeah, interesting stuff. I don't know, interesting perk combination potentially. And we'll see what happens. But obviously this thing directly compares with accrued redemption. And so we'll have to see whether the increased draw time is worth it when it comes to this sort of synergy, as well as the over-penetrating stuff. Next up, we have Phenutria Fera. Hope I'm saying that right. This is a solar spread shot hand cannon. So that's right, they made a shotgun hand cannon. It is pretty interesting. It has perks like 1-2 punch. They basically give these things like shotgun perks, right? These are all like, that's a shotgun perk, 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 that's a shotgun perk. So yeah, they basically just give these hand cannons shotgun perks, right? And all I need to say here is this is cool, I guess, but it has a worse perk combination than Aureus, which is the other shotgun hand cannon that we're going to talk about in a second, okay? Because Aureus gets a Vorpal in the first column and also has the potential to swap to Ariana's Vow by Lucky Pants transferring stacks, whereas this is obviously a solar hand cannon, so you can't swap to Ariana's Vow, okay? So that is that. Let's go ahead and move on to Agape. And then obviously the viability of this hand cannon is going to just rely on some testing stuff, but you know, could be an interesting kind of competitor to a sidearm, right? You would compare it to like a heliocentric. That would be a good example. Okay, Agape, new solar 225 hand cannon in the energy slot, and this one is the new best in slot energy Lucky Pants hand cannon, right? Because it has I guess you could go like rewind rounds where really anything in the first column as long as you have the 26 mag, and then you also have precision instrument. And precision instrument is the best, I guess, energy slot damage perk that any 225 RPM hand cannon has ever received. So this is technically the best in slot Lucky Pants hand cannon now for energy, at least. Not that Lucky Pants is insanely dominant or anything right now, and I think Lucky Pants is largely going to be focused on the contributions of the spread shot hand cannons rather than this guy. In terms of like average, like normal content, I don't think this is necessarily going to replace stuff like Word of Crota in terms of general viability, but you know, Heel Clip Incandescent is kind of nice, I suppose. Okay, or I guess you have like Firefly too, but yeah, whatever. Moving on, we have Percipial. Percipial is a precision frame void shotgun. Unfortunately, precision frame is the worst shotgun frame in PvE, so I think most people are going to be seeking to use this in PvP. Has threat detector, slide shot, opening shot, blah 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 blah, your usual PvP perks. But it does have 1-2 punch in the first column, which is kind of interesting, I suppose. And you can pair it with stuff like, I don't know, Vorpal, I guess. Nothing else here is really like super enticing. So I guess if you want a 1-2 punch shotgun that's going to be used short term, and you want to just boost your damage a tiny bit by having Vorpal on the shotgun for an extra 15%, go for it. But I don't think this 15% is ever really going to matter in terms of damage when it comes to grapple melee stuff, because your grapple melee is obviously going to do way more damage than the shotgun. So this is kind of a whatever. It's like a technically if you want to, you know, min max your shotgun 1-2 punch damage, you can go for this, right? Although, you know, I guess redirection 1-2 punch or, you know, a sudden death is going to be better in that regard. Okay, next up we have Sublimation. Already off to a bad start. It's a high impact scout, one of the worst archetypes of PvE weapon. And it's a bad frame, right? We talked about this, and it has decent perks though, right? It has okay perks. You have like Eddy Current, which is fine. You have Impromptu, which is fine. You have Shoot to Loot, which is fine. Rapid Hit Demo, which is fine. Volt Shot is like okay, right? On a slow reloading sour archetype, not that great. You have like, I don't know, Explosive Payload, Rolling Storm, I don't know. It has like okay arc perks, but again, it's a bad frame, just gonna be awkward, world drop level stuff. We have an energy mountaintop. We have an arc mountaintop, which is kind of nice. I know my friend Spider was complaining that this thing doesn't have good reload perks like auto loading, but reconstruction is potentially pretty good. A lot of the time on mountaintop, you're, you know, kind of AFKing or doing other stuff for a bit, and so you're gonna get it to 2 in the mag. And so a big problem with mountaintop was that the auto loading nerf made it way more annoying to use mountaintop back to back when you're doing big jumps. And reconstruction, I think, will solve this problem to a large degree. So I'm kind of happy about this, that it has reconstruction. Obviously, I wish it had auto loading as well, but it's kind of whatever. I mean, the rest of these perks are just kind of whatever. I think these are the perks that you're probably going to be seeking on this gun, from Reconstruction to Volt Shot plus Binary. But, you know, it's just an arc mounted top. I think that's the main takeaway here. It doesn't really matter what perks it has, to be honest. It's just having an energy slot mount top is useful for speedrunning. So I'm happy, right? Next, we have 3 weapons that are basically world drop level bad. Okay, you have a rapid fire void sniper named Shoreline Dissident. This is the most world drop perk pool I've ever seen in my entire life. Okay, you have wow, outlaw on a sniper in 25. Recycled energy, ambitious assassin. You know, shoot to loot is fine, and then they give it explosive payload in the wrong slot. So you know that's nice, I guess. Triple tap in the big 25. Lone wolf. Yeah, these are just terrible, terrible, terrible. I should have used red. Hold on, let me fix this. I should use red. There we go. Demoralize on a sniper, not very good. Destab could be, I mean, explosive payload destab could be like, it could be like the new solo GK sniper or whatever, or duo GK sniper for destabilizing your Praetorians. But you know, the other stuff here is like, it's just whatever. It's so whatever. Okay, so this is bad. Ulterior observation, aggressive frame, stasis machine gun. I like aggressive frame machine guns, but this is, yeah, it's just bad. It's just bad. You have Rhyme Stealer Headstone, but this is on other, you know, machine guns as well. You have like, I guess, you know, Headstone Dragonfly is potentially decent. I shouldn't have said world drop level bad, actually. I think I saw Dragonfly on my first pass of this, and then when I was going through and making comments, I think I didn't see the Dragonfly in the second column here. So Headstone Dragonfly is like potentially pretty decent. So I'm gonna take back my comment of world drop level bad. It's not world drop level bad, it's just okay, right? There's other machine guns that have like double damage / double slash perks that are definitely better. And I haven't seen the origin trade on this thing, but you know, it'd be probably pretty hard to beat like a Cursed Thrall or something like that. So this is probably just going to be okay, like A tier or like B tier machine gun. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Let's move on. Boomslang 4FR. This is like an ad clear linear. They didn't give it Discord though. I was hoping for like a, I don't know, like a maybe Discord jolting feedback or Discord reservoir burst would be a pretty good, you know, cool linear. But unfortunately, this has Rolling Storm in the first column. It has no overflow perks with something like Reservoir Burst. So, you know, I just, you know, you can see the perk pool. It's just not good. We're just gonna move on. I'm gonna save your time. Okay. Next up, we have Aurora Dawn, which is a Stasis Wave Sword. This has like double damage perks apparently. Reaper's Tithe, I think follow up with question marks here, so I'm not sure if it actually has this, but this is potentially a good roaming sword, right? You can use Reaper's Tithe and Cold Steel at the same time and run around with a damage perk plus Cold Steel or plus Honing or something like that. So it could be potentially useful in that regard. Apparently one of the wave swords was seen to have Eager Edge. I don't know if it's this one or the other wave sword. The other wave sword we know even less about, so we'll talk about that in a second. Next up we have Aureus Neutralizer. So this is green, right? And also, if you couldn't tell by now, green means I think it's good, yellow means it's, I don't know, it's like okay, and then red means I think it's like a non-starter. Okay, so green, Aureus Neutralizer. This thing has, let me just show you, Vorpal Weapon and Cascade Point, right? And a lot of perks in Destiny that require stacking hits, they trigger off of any hit, right? So for example, redirection on the a sudden death, which is like a pellet shotgun. If you spray an ad with it and a bunch of pellets hit the ad, you get a bunch of stacks for it. And on the same token, if you spray a boss, it removes a bunch of stacks, right? And so if that same logic applies to Lucky Pants and you spray a boss with this just to the right degree where you can shoot him with, you know, around like 7 pellets, and then you swap to Ariana, you could instantly stack Ariana to max stacks pretty much and just like dump it, right? Which would be pretty awesome, pretty crazy. Or this thing also has Cascade Point, right? So what you could do is you could hit 2 crits with like a heavy burst slug in your energy slot, swap to this thing. There's no bait and switch requirement, no special honing requirement or anything like that. And it will potentially absolutely shred using Lucky Pants. So, you know, I'm pretty excited to see the possibilities here. You could even pair this with like, oh dude, I wonder, maybe the actual tech is going to be running both spread shot hand cannons and using the energy spread shot hand cannon to stack to 7 and then swapping to this guy and going to town. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. We'll see. It entirely depends on the Lucky Pants interaction with this whole pellet thing. Okay, moving on. Lionfish 4FR. This looks like a Chill Clip Riptide replacement. It is obviously enhanceable, much newer, much prettier, I should say. And the perks, you know, it has like the classic controlled reservoir that you expect to see on fusion rifles these days, like on Scatter Signal, but we are unaware whether or not it's going to get Chill Clip. Hopefully it gets Chill Clip in this area, but if, you know, if it gets it in here, I won't complain. Okay, next up we have Stars in Shadow. This is world drop level bad. I believe it has a couple other perks here that I actually did see, but nothing changed my mind. This is pretty bad. It's also a high impact frame pulse, which is a, you know, already a bad start in PvE. We have Pure Recollection, which is a heavy burst Void Slug, so the second heavy burst in the game after Arcane Embrace. These perks already are not looking too good. I'm assuming this is going to be more of a PvP weapon. Maybe Headseeker will allow you to like shoot someone once in the body with like the first pellet, and then, you know, like flick, and then, you know, hit them in the head or something and one-shot them. I don't know. But as for the other stuff, I don't know. It could be decent if the other perks end up being good, but right now it just looks like PvP perks. So again, need to see more perks. For now, kind of whatever. Heavy bursts are also getting a buff in the Edge of Fate, and we'll definitely test them, see if they're good for DPS. But for now, leave it on the back burner. Okay, next up we have Returned Memory, which is a new Solar Rocket sidearm, so it's an aberrant competitor. And, you know, it has some decent perks. I think Burning Ambition is probably going to be pretty bad on this thing, because even if Burning Ambition is a mag percent based perk, that's still going to be pretty bad on something like a Rocket sidearm. One for All, kind of whatever. Other perks we don't really know about. Incandescent is fine. And then it also has Impromptu Ammunition. So this is what I was talking about. Obviously, some weapons with Impromptu Ammunition will probably be decent. And so I'm excited to maybe see how good Impromptu Ammunition is, and then maybe run it with like Incandescent for like a contest activity. I don't know. We'll see. But hard to beat Aberrant. Don't know if it has heal clip. We'll see. Okay, moving on. We have Solemn Remembrance, which is from Comp. This is a 180 RPM stasis hand cannon. Okay. And this thing has Firefly Headstone, which is, at least in my opinion, probably makes it the best kinetic slot hand cannon for PvE in the game. Stuff like Kinetic Tremors is a bit awkward to use on hand cannons. It takes a while to trigger, and if I'm not mistaken, Spider told me like the scaler is not really worth it. So yeah, kinetic hand cannon wise, you're competing with stuff like Fatebringer, with like Midnight Coup, and you know, it's, I don't know, Firefly and Headstone are, this is a reload perk combined with like a decent splash perk, and this also splashes as well. And if I'm not mistaken, perks like Dragonfly, when you shoot an enemy with this weapon to make a headstone, the Firefly will then immediately detonate and break the headstone, which is really nice, right? So this could potentially be the best kinetic slot ad clear hand cannon in the game, or just in general hand cannon in the game. It has like a really good archetype as well. But unfortunately, you have a bunch of perks that are obviously PvP focused, which are going to probably kind of make this annoying to farm compared to your average hand cannon, right? So, and obviously the origin traits are replaced with grips as well, which is a downside for PvE, even though it's maybe an upside for PvP. Auric Disabler, this is basically similar to Rufus. We don't have that many like good strand autos in the game that are up to date with like the modern double splash philosophy. So having Dragonfly in the first column, as well as, I don't know, like Onslaught or DM or like Kill Clip or whatever, could be potentially useful, but I don't think it's that great. Precision frame autos are just okay. And so this thing is probably going to land power wise somewhere around Rufus, which I think is like in the B or in the C tier of autos. Yeah, this is just PvP stuff. I don't really need to talk about this. Rapid fire scouts are the best frame of scout, but you know, one look at this perk pool, and you know, it's not very PvE focused. Just gonna say it's for PvP. Forgiveness, same thing. Even though a lot of these perks do kind of look PvE-ish, it's definitely not a PvE weapon given the perks it's had in the past and the perks it looks like they're going to give it. Next up, we have Unwavering Duty. Unwavering Duty is a pretty decent solar LMG from Trials. It has autoloading, it had, I should say, incandescent in the second column. It's now been moved into the first column. So, you know, I'm a big fan of double splash on machine guns. You know, Spider doesn't like double splash as much on machine guns. He really likes reload perks. But if you were to run something like incandescent and, I don't know, like Firefly or something, I could see that being good. But Burning Ambition, if it's mag percent based, I don't know. I just don't see Burning Ambitions being good on a machine gun, just in general. You know, target lock is kind of whatever on an adaptive, right? You have tap the trigger, that's PvP. Cascade point, not really relevant for ad clear. And then you have bait and switch, which is like okay for ad clear, but not great, right? So just an awkward kind of combination going on here. I really just hope this is like Firefly or something. That would be cool, right? And then we have our 4 most unknown weapons. Ribbon Tail, I believe someone only saw like a peek at this weapon's icon as well as a small amount of perks. It's a new strand trace. It's probably going to be worse than Unsworn, which is, you know, kind of a high bar to clear, but it's probably just going to be worse than Unsworn. And the perks that we do see, they're not that good, right? They're not that good. This is kind of just a whatever perk. This is not really relevant for a trace for the most part. This is fine, but not amazing. And then this is like fine, but again, not incredibly important to have on a trace. And then finally, there are 3 more weapons. There was a rocket that we saw in the trailer that we don't know anything about. There's Ahab Char, which is a solar auto or something like that dropped for someone, but we didn't see any of the perks. And then finally, we have Sinancia, which is apparently a solar waveframe sword that could be the one that had Eager on it, but I am not sure. Also, if we do get Eager Edge on a waveframe sword, it's not going to be a big deal. The eager does not affect the upswing, and the heavy attack on waveframe swords is very underwhelming when it comes to skating. You can actually heavy attack with the eager lunge part, but it requires specific terrain. Like it requires like an object in front of you for you to lunge over in order to cancel that animation with like a well skate. So yeah, that's pretty much it for weapons. Again, I'll go over a summary of like what I think is important on the weapons at the end of this video, but yeah, that's all the weapons. Let's go to origin traits. Again, I have some comments here. This would be pretty short and sweet. Vanguard, Determination, and Problem Solver for PvE, being the two PvE kind of focused activity-based origin traits, are probably the better of the 5 here. You have, after using your class ability, final blows with this weapon grant you bonus damage resistance. Could be good on Hunter, but again, it has to be with this weapon, which kind of restricts you to using like more accurate weapons and not, you know, just being able to melee spam. It's not just any final blow. This is nice because this is free exhaust, right? And exhaust you can get from using overload mods or using like div, I believe, exhausts like bosses. But if you don't want to use those and you have like a weapon that's for DPS, like a rocket or something with wolf pact with problem solver, could be potentially good, right? It's free boss damage reduction, and boss damage reduction is low-key hella underrated in this game, especially for contest activities. So it could be pretty good. Something like something to add on to your sever and stuff like that. Exhaustive research, I actually saw a clip of someone using this. It basically looks like box breathing, except like when you shoot at a little like nanotech tracer rocket, except nanotech tracer rockets already exist in this game and do not require you to ADS for a long time without shooting, and also are sustained damage and happen over time. So nanotech is probably just gonna be better than this. And then finally you have these two, which are just obviously PvP. I mean, you can see that here. Increased movement speed, airborne effectiveness, that's PvP. And then you have stability and handling, which again is for PvP. Okay, next up we have weapon mods, right? Let's briefly talk about these. Temporal stuff is going to be seasonal stuff, right? So it's going to expire after a season. And yeah, we'll briefly talk about them. Okay, so we have Bandolier. I don't know how different this ammo generation thing, I mean, the language is the same, right? So I don't know how this ammo generation is going to differ from abundant ammo, but this seems like it's going to be a finder enhancement replacement. You guys know how on primary weapons you can put on heavy ammo finder enhancement. I'm assuming this is just a replacement for that, and that heavy ammo finders in your helmet are also going to be replaced with some other sort of ammo generation increase. Okay, these mods, which are the enhanced temporary mods that you can use on the new weapons, most of them are kind of mid or like PvP based, but these are pretty strong, right? I mean, this is flat out just like Cabal/Vex spec, which is, I don't know, usually with mods they go for like a roundabout way of increasing damage, but this is straight up just an increase to damage. So if it's a Cabal or Vex raid that we have in the future for the next day one, definitely something to be aware of. And then also this right over here seems like a kinetic tremors-esque kind of thing. As you do more and more damage, you can unleash the charges of your damage that you've dealt to create an explosive blast, which sustain damage on like a weapon perk. I'm always down for that for boss DPS. So cool stuff. And if it's this portion of its damage, this might be kind of unique, because typically in Destiny, when we're dealing with charged up stuff, it's based on hits and it's based on mag percentage. It's a very common way that Destiny's sandbox team makes on hit calculations, but it says portion of its damage, which is kind of interesting. So I don't know. Regardless, I think if you put this on a rocket, it'd be pretty strong. Yeah, this one, it says like, I don't know, when you get crit kills, you make like a bunch of explosions around stuff. Crit kills are kind of a turnoff in the current PvE sandbox, because generally you're either getting body kills or you're getting ability kills, but you know, with the right weapon could be potentially pretty good, right? And then this is like PvP stuff, right? So the enhanced mods that you guys are used to, radar tuner, counterbalance, Icarus grip, you know, that boosts are a lot higher, or you get like more handling or stuff like that, right? So these are the enhanced mods that we were talking about that you can put on tier 4 weapons and above. So that's pretty much it for legendary weapons. Let's move on to our last couple topics here. First, we have Graviton Spike, and second, we have third iteration. And these are the new exotic weapons. So in a nutshell, Graviton Spike is basically, you get 3, I think it's either kills or crits, and then it'll charge up the opposing energy of arc/stasis that is present on the weapon. Okay, so it's, yeah, blows and precision hits, right? So you get like 3 crits, you charge, you swap, and then you shoot. You get a special effect. It's either like a bull charge that summons down on whatever you shoot, or it's like a stasis crystal like wave splash effect. So anything with splash, anything that's on hit, I'm a big fan of. And it's a hand cannon. Hand cannons are generally among the better weapon families when it comes to endgame PvE. So I can see people potentially using this. It looks like it might have some range issues, but besides that, you know, it seems pretty decent, to be honest. yeah, interested to see how this thing synergizes, but I don't think it's going to be dethroning any of the most popular and very potent exotic primaries at this current time. Next up, we have third iteration. This seems like a very slow-paced, kind of gimmicky type of weapon. It's like a ninja weapon, right? You kind of like ADS for a long time. It concentrates all of the fire of the weapon into a single shot, and then when you kill a marked target in this fashion, you go invisible. So it's kind of like old stylish chaining, except for it's like on a single weapon, and you know, it's kind of fine, I guess. I thought the damage was like decent, I suppose, for like longer range engagements. And I believe, you know, a couple years ago when people were like plinking away with things in scout rifles and GMs, they probably would have liked an exotic weapon like this, but these days, not really as relevant. And the reload animation being as slow as it is kind of annoying, and you know, the slowly refilling over time kind of makes it act like a special weapon, when in reality primaries are generally what you stay on when it comes to weaponry, so that effect is kind of wasted. And then obviously the needing to ADS, you know, less the damage goes down a lot is kind of weird. And then the choir spread on like the weapons, it kind of just looks like choir, but it just looks really janky. It looks really awkward, very slow paced gameplay. So I don't expect third iteration to be very good in PvE. Graviton Spike I could see being potentially good, but we'll have to compare it to other exotic weapons and how they feel in the new sandbox. And finally, let's go ahead and look at the artifact mods. So this is a screenshot from the Raffle Waffles video. I think he has his own takes on these, but I'm just gonna live just breeze through these, right? Because we've seen a lot of these before. But yeah, anti-barrier, scout, and pulse I think are not going to be relevant for contest content for the most part. There's no champs, and even if there were champs, you wouldn't be using a scout or a pulse. Unstoppable sidearm and hand cannon, this could potentially be useful for rocket sidearms. Hand cannons are decent as well, so you know, could potentially be useful, so I'll leave like a triangle on this, pretty decent. Unstoppable sniper, I really like unstoppable weapon options that are just instant fire and don't require you to ADS for a while, but you know, it is a special weapon, so you know, we'll give it a triangle. Overload shotgun, I like this one. Shotguns are hit scan. They're very easy to pull out and just like, you know, hip fire into a boss or hip fire into a champion. And so, yeah, I'm a big fan of overload shotgun. That's nice. And then overload rapid fire is auto and SMG. Two weapon types, which are like, you know, not that great, not amazing. We'll probably be using overload shotgun or some sort of other overload effect like chill clip, like we typically do. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little X on this one. Okay. This is largely irrelevant for the most part. Scab mods being discounted. This is fine, you know, probably something you'll take to fill up your artifact and allow it to progress the additional columns. This is kind of whatever, right? Frost armor being active, again, yeah, this is kind of whatever. While woven mail is active, gain increased super and grenade stats. I could see you taking this on like Hunter with like Hoyle Arachne, because you have woven mail active pretty much all the time, which is a great way of having, you know, increased super and grenade stats. So I will give this a situational triangle, but on Hunter, I think it's going to be pretty good. On Hunter, or sorry, I should say on Titan and Warlock, the two other classes, on the subclasses and builds that you typically play on those two classes, you're not going to have woven mail very often unless you're playing Strand Titan. So I think it's largely irrelevant for those two classes. Rapid precision rifling, yeah, this is like more of like I think a PvP thing. Yeah, not really a PvE thing, so we'll put an X on it. Rapid precision hits with solar weapons grant radiant. Rapid precision hits with stasis weapons grant frost armor. Okay, the problem with this is that for the most part in the meta right now, there are not many weapons where you're getting rapid precision hits with either solar weapons or with stasis weapons, right? So a little bit awkward. And for the most part, oh, I just deleted everything. Okay, let me let me redo this real quick. Sorry about that. For the most part, you're not really getting rapid precision hits with these weapon types in the current sandbox. You're usually just getting ability kills. But in the off chance that you decide to use something like a solar sidearm to guarantee radiant, even in those cases, for the most part, the subclasses that really benefit from radiant and the builds that really benefit from radiant, you can just get radiant on demand from like meleeing something, right? You have Ember of Torches, you have Facet of Dawn. You really don't need this. And the frost armor is kind of nice, but I really can't think of a lot of stasis weapons where you're getting rapid precision hits and they're actually relevant in the meta when it comes to ad clear. I guess maybe like Tinashe, or I guess maybe the new compan cannon could be good in like endgame PvE. But for the most part, like frost armor is a nice effect, don't get me wrong, but there are way easier ways to get DR, and I just don't think people are really going to be using a stasis precision weapon for the most part in endgame content, especially like this upcoming day one. So it's kind of whatever. This is fine, right? This is fine. The problem is class ability is just not that important in endgame content. And so, you know, you're giving your allies elemental buffs like fairly often. I think the biggest beneficiary of this is probably Bull Charge Titan, because I'm pretty sure your barricade giving Bull Charge to your teammates counts as giving them an elemental buff, which will allow you to spam barricades, which, although we're losing flashover in the artifact, having a Bull Charge Titan, you know, it's always a plus. And always having a rally barricade up also for DPS to block splash damage during like dangerous boss phases is always a plus, right? And then also I would say obviously Solar Warlock, right? So let me write SW. Solar Warlock just to get Phoenix Dives back, to get Rifts back, because you're going to be giving your allies Radiant and Resto and all that stuff all the time, which will obviously allow you to feed back into your ability loop a lot faster. So check mark for me. While you have Frost Armor, taking critical damage release. Okay, so anything that's taking critical damage related in this game is generally pretty bad. There's like arc fragments that do it, you know, there's other stuff that does it. But generally, you know, freezes nearby commands, grants Frost Armor to you and your nearby allies. This kind of reminds me of that, I think it's the Ion or Aeon armor set bonus, where it's like after you activate Force Converter for the first time that you like take critical damage and you start sprinting, it's speed booster. So I don't know how much Frost Armor this is. If the Frost Armor is like a lot, if the Frost Armor is like a lot of stacks, then it could be good. If it's just one Frost Armor, it's kind of whatever. I don't know. I guess the freezing of the nearby commands could be potentially useful, but Frost Armor is kind of annoying to get and keep on a lot of the modern builds that people use, because on Warlock, you're not going to be on the Stasis Super, so you're not going to get that from Facet of Purpose. On Titan, you're generally not going to be on Glacial Quake. You're probably going to be on Thunder Crash instead, so Frost Armor is going to be hard to come by. And then on Hunter, it's kind of obviously the same thing. You might run Squall actually on Hunter, so potentially that could be useful on Hunter, and especially because you're nearby a lot of enemies on Hunter, if you're doing like the melee combination blow build. So yeah, this could be useful on Hunter, but for the most part, not really. I'm not even going to go back and remark all these because, you know, you guys know my opinions on them. Okay, Reciprocal Draw. A period of increased damage for a short time upon the next draw. So this could be useful with Mechaneers and like Forerunner and you know, and a Final Warning. But I think for the most part, it really depends. It really depends on how much this increased damage is. I think for the most part though, this is going to be largely irrelevant. Okay. Next up, we have Refresh Threads. Picking up an elemental pickup matching your subclass element or Tangle while you have a Strand Super grants energy to your release charge ability. Now the problem here is the Strand Super part. Okay. Nobody gaff about Silk Strike. Nobody gaff about Needle Storm for the most part, especially for day one damage. You'd rather have more consistent damage or a well. And then, you know, Blade Fury, nobody gaff about that either. Okay. So for example, you know, when it comes to contest content, you're generally picking supers that are more damage oriented or more purely survivability oriented. And none of the Strand supers really fit under that, you know, kind of, I don't know, classification. This is, I think, strictly designed for the new exotic. I forgot what name it is. What's the name? Moirai. I think this is explicitly for Moirai, because you look at it, right? Picking up an elemental pickup matching your subclass element or Tangle while you have a Strand Super grants energy to your release charge ability. This is just to make Moirai's engine run faster, right? That is what this is for. This is just not, I think, relevant for contest content. Destroying a Tangle with Strand damage increases the radius of its explosion and its damage. Could be useful, right? Because you do make Tangles sometimes on Prismatic, depending on what you're building with. But the Strand abilities on Prismatic are among the weaker ones. I would say the most consistent Strand ability that gets kills in endgame content on any of the Prismatic subclasses is going to be the Grapple melee on Hunter. So could make use of that, right? It makes the Tangles less useless, but, you know, might be more useful to have some of these other artifact mods instead. This says specifically non-boss combatants. So this increased solar damage from all sources thing is going to have to be a lot of damage if it's going to be useful, because generally speaking in Destiny, especially in endgame content, mini boss or non-boss combatants like minors, you know, majors, whatever, they're not that dangerous, and having to stasis or Strand debuff them just to increase their solar damage that they take is a lot of hoops to jump through when you can just kill the enemy, right? So Cauterized Darkness is kind of whatever. If this was, you know, boss damage included, maybe we'd have something to talk about, but it's not. Elemental Daze, stunning a champion with an elemental. Okay, so in GMs, this is just gonna be a no-brainer. On contests, there's no champs, right? So no-brainer for GMs, just take this. It's like a Revitalizing Blast. It's like Defibrillating Blast, right? It's just that mod, but for this season, right? So just it's GM mod. Shoulder to shoulder, I mean, sustained precision damage. Yeah, if you're doing like a sniper or linear damage strategy on day one, this is great. This is great. It's just free DR. It's just free DR, right? So that's good. Elemental Coalescence, defeating targets has the chance to create an elemental pickup matching your equipped super element. So this is designed to pair actually with this, right? So Elemental Coalescence is designed to be paired with Elemental Overdrive. The problem is if you want to consistently get Elemental Overdrive to work correctly, then you kind of need to not have this be like a chance thing. Usually when it says defeating targets has the chance to create something, it's actually a counter system. Usually it's 3 kills, right? It's 3 kills of like a minor, it's 3 minor, or it's 1 major, right? So this should be a slash, sorry. So 3 minors or 1 major, and it's usually like a counter system, right? But that being said, I mean, I don't know. An artifact mod just to create elemental pickups when you have other, you know, elemental pickup fragments and stuff like that, not super necessary in my opinion. So you know, take it or leave it. Kind of depends on the situation. I can see maybe speedrunners running this and like creating like a fire sprite for themselves and like, you know, doing Hezen damage or something like that, but that's way too specific for most endgame content. Next up we have Radiant Shrapnel. This is basically just, it's like free damage. Like I think everyone's probably just gonna run this, right? Because when you're doing damage on day one, you're radiant all the time. You're in a well, right? And then you're just gonna shoot a boss, and it's gonna just create solar, you know, projectiles that just go out and, you know, hit the target and ignite it over time, right? So it's basically like Unravel, but it's solar, and it is based on an artifact mod. So, you know, everyone can kind of just run this, and it's free ignitions, free extra damage, whatever. Shield Crush, we've had this before. This is fine, right? It's just increased melee and grenade damage. We talked about, you know, grapple meleeing being like a big thing. This is going to improve that even more. I think it's 15% for both sides. So multiplicatively, that's like over 30%, or something like that. I could be wrong, by the way, but you know, this is just going to make grapple meleeing insanely strong. So there's that. But I think on day one, I mean, on day one, you might run this. Yeah, you might run this on day one, but you know, for the most part, just a flat damage increase, nothing like crazy unique or anything like that. This is going to depend on how much damage. Knowing Bungie, it's probably going to be 10 to 15, but we'll see, right? But you know, could be pretty good. The problem is the most dominant damage types are solar right now. It's mostly just solar, and so, or maybe arc. And the pickups that are associated, fire sprites and ionic traces, are kind of annoying to come by, especially on Prismatic. So you know, I don't see this mod being super relevant. Tangled Web, creating a tangle by defeating a strand of targets, suspends nearby commands. Again, this is designed to be paired with Moirai. This is just designed to be paired with Moirai. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, you could run it on Prismatic Hunter and just like make your tangles and stuff by grapple meleeing stuff, and it'll suspend everything nearby. But yeah, it's more of a neutral thing than a, you know, than a big important, you know, mod for every build to have. And then finally, Frigid Glare. While Frost Armor is active, Stasis Precision vulnerable. Yeah, this is kind of just whatever. I guess this gives every like Stasis Precision weapon an Aggers-like effect where it, like, you know, freezes stuff nearby. Could potentially be useful if you want to take a Stasis like primary into the day one or into contest content, but for the most part, you know, I don't think it's that relevant. So let's go ahead and briefly review here. Don't care, okay, good, right? This is a don't care, this is okay, this is a don't care, this is potentially okay, right? Again, depends on your build, and this is a don't care. This is potentially okay, but I think mostly a don't care. This is potentially okay, and I'm gonna write a note here, again, Bolt Charge or Solar Warlock. This is potentially useful on Hunter, right? On a Prismatic Hunter, if you have Silence the Squall as your equip super, as well as Facet of Purpose. I think this is largely going to be irrelevant. I think this is also largely going to be irrelevant because of the super requirement. I think this is also largely going to be irrelevant, This is relevant for GM stuff, but probably not for the day one. This could be very useful for the day one if you're doing sniper or linear damage. I don't know why I keep drawing triangles. I think this is going to be largely relevant for the day one. I think this is okay, but there's probably other mods that you'd probably rather have. This is definitely going to be relevant for the day one. It's free damage. This is probably not going to be relevant for the day one because it depends on what damage type you're doing, I guess. But yeah, I don't think so. And then this could be relevant for the day one if you're on like Prismatic Hunter. And then this is also like potentially relevant, right? So the artifact this season, it's not that strong, right? I mean, usually Act 2 mods are like the OP ones. So we'll see in the mid-season when the artifact expands how much stuff we're going to get, and maybe like a new OP artifact mod. But for the most part, nothing too crazy. Nothing to worry about for the most part. Okay, that is pretty much it. I'm going to go over like a brief summary of everything that I've talked about now. For those of you that just want to like skip to the end of the video, I'll just do a brief summary. Okay, so from the top, leveling. For the most part, don't really need to worry about this. Not going to change too much. There's a new currency, but you're going to have tons of this currency as long as you play the game. So I know a lot of people are complaining, not going to be a big deal. No more lockout and power grind, so you and your friends, you and your day one team can go in and just grind as much as you want to get as high power as you want, to unlock as much of the artifact mods as you want, okay? Ammo system appears to be becoming more consistent, but that's really the only details you really need to know about. There's ways to manipulate this meter using perks and using probably mods, but besides that, nothing too crazy, okay? There's a new portal system, which will basically make it easier for even endgame players to direct themselves toward what they need in order to power grind, right? So it's a lot simpler than being like, oh, what's the pinnacle? What you know, icons on my map have the pinnacle icon next to them, and you know, it's just a lot easier, right? Prismatic aspect slot nerfs, these 4 aspects, this one being Feed the Void if you don't know the abbreviation, they're all going to have 1 fragment slot. So Prismatic Titan basically is going to have 2 fragments now. Not a huge deal, as long as you pick Faceted Protection, that's the important one. But yeah, just something you need to know about. This doesn't really matter for the most part. This doesn't really matter for the most part. This doesn't really matter for the most part, and this doesn't really matter for the most part. I will be talking about if, you know, damage numbers have changed significantly, for example, in order to offset the fact that we are now doing more weapon damage with the maxed out weapon stat, if we start doing less weapon damage to targets proportionally as a result, we'll have to see how Bungie decides to kind of stealth balance weapons, or whether or not they're going to remain completely proportional. Like, for example, if a Xeno shot does 1% of Templar's health right now, is it still going to do 1% of Templar's health after the patch? Legendary armor, for the most part, you don't really need to farm armor unless you want a different distribution. The stats, we've already talked about them, but for the most part, the health stat looks like the most underwhelming one. The other stats are all going to be situational based on what you want to build into. But in my opinion, grapple meleeing is going to be insanely strong on this next patch unless it's addressed immediately. It's just going to be insanely strong. Old armor is probably around tier 3.5, but you don't really need to worry too much about getting like tier 5 armor right now. It doesn't really change that much. As long as you're able to get maybe like 200 or close to 200 in the stats that you actually care about, it's not a big deal, right? It's not a huge deal. So the super stat could potentially affect active gain scaling, but again, that's a testing thing, not super important. There's new archetypes for armor for focusing. Your old exotics, like exotic armor, regular armor, and exotic class items, those are all going to be retrofitted and converted with modern stat distributions and spikes that appropriately reflect their level of power in the current sandbox, which, you know, basically just means you don't really need to regrind for the most part, unless you want specifically different stat distributions. The stats themselves, I'm not going to like re-summarize them, but, you know, you can see the changes in this video or go back to the timestamp if you want to take a look at them. For speedrunners in particular, mobility is now set to 30 at base, but you can restore some potentially up to 90 or maybe up to 100 using leg mods, meaning you cannot have 100 mobility and movement plus surges on at the same time unless Bungie addresses this change in some way in the coming months. Resilience, we do not know. You're going to have the same level of health as if you had 100 resilience, but we don't know what the DR situation is like, so we'll see what that is. Armor set bonuses, some of them are pretty cool, but they're not insanely strong, the ones that we've seen so far. If you're going to grind for one of them, probably Bushido is the best one, but again, it's not like make or break, it's not life and death. Exotic armor, none of the new exotic armor pieces are particularly interesting for endgame content. We talked about this stuff, and again, if you want to refocus an exotic, you're going to get 20 free vouchers that you can go to and visit Rahul or Ada or whoever the vendor is, and you can focus them into 2 specific stats that you care about a lot on specific armor pieces if you don't want, for example, health, because I know a lot of people have exotic armor that is resil focused, and resil is being converted into health, and health I think is one of the worst stats maybe, if not. Legendary weapons, summary wise, I mean, tier 5 weapons have enhanced origin traits, that's like the big thing, and then tier 4 weapons have enhanced mods. The other stuff like enhanced mag and barrel, not that important. Some of the new seasonal mods look like they're potentially powerful, right? They give you just flat damage increases against certain enemy types like Cabal and Vex, so that could potentially be good depending on what species the raid has, what faction the raid has, so we'll see about that. And then new perks, origin traits, weapons, and mods. The only thing here that I can see here is potentially game warping is probably, I mean, the Arc Mountaintop is nice, so I mean, maybe get your hands on that, but that's not game warping, is maybe the Lucky Pants interaction with the Spread Shot Hand Cannon archetype. If the Spread Shot Hand Cannon archetype, every single pellet counts as a stack for Lucky Pants, this could be the best Lucky Pants archetype in the game and could actually shoot primary DPS like way higher than it currently is on current heavy burst hand cannons, so it could be potentially pretty good, but the rest of the weapons are not that important. None of the new perks are important or insanely good. None of the new origin traits are insanely good or insanely important. Problem Solver is kind of interesting. Vanguard Determination requires you know, weapon final blows, but I don't think it's going to be on any meta weapons as of late. New weapon mods, yeah, I mean, these are nice and stuff, but yeah, the temporal mods, like these 2 mods are probably the ones to look out for once we get those. Yeah, the new rocket pulse looks like it's gonna have too little ammo to be relevant in endgame content, maybe in like speedrunning for burst damage on like mini bosses and stuff like that, but for endgame content doesn't really look like that for the most part. And then the new high impact longbow, it's probably too slow paced regardless, even if it is kind of quirky to be used in endgame content, but again, we'll see when that weapon releases. The new exotic weapon, Graviton Spike, it's craftable, it has some decent perks, it looks potentially decent, but you'll need to play to find out, but I don't think it's so good off the rip that you should just use it regardless of if you like it or not. And then third iteration does not look like it'll be good in endgame content at all. And then finally, artifact mods, which we literally just went over. But the main ones that you should actually pay attention to are you should have Radiant Shrapnel equipped most likely. This could be good on Prismatic Hunter. This could be good if you're taking a Stasis primary. The other stuff here is kind of fine. This is just good for neutral gameplay. So I think for most people, you're going to take these two in the last column. And then as for the other stuff, I mean, this is for champ content. If your day one team is doing, you know, precision-based damage shoulder to shoulder is really good. And then the other stuff here is kind of whatever. Like this is kind of like fine. This is fine. You know, this is good on Prismatic Hunter with Sword Arachne. But again, you know, the artifact mods are not insanely crazy. Besides this one boosting the hell out of grapple damage. Okay, that's pretty much it. That is pretty much it. A lot of talking, a lot of content to go over. If you guys have any questions, you know, feel free to let me know in the comment section. Again, I was not actually there at Bungie, you know, playing this content, so I didn't have firsthand experience. This is just the impression that I got after watching a lot of content and talking with a lot of people, especially my friend Spider, shout out to him. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm excited. This new sandbox looks really fun to play in. The tier 5 stuff doesn't look as necessary as I originally thought. And I think the thing I'm most excited about as an endgame player and as a tester is probably the new stat stuff. The new stat stuff, I'm excited to, you know, max out my stats and go absolutely crazy with some damage stuff. I think the damage sandbox will probably need a little bit of a knocking down a peg or two after this happens, but we'll see. Maybe Bungie wants like a very potent sandbox, and we'll see again how damage scaling has changed in order to account for all of this new bonuses that we're getting from armor stats. But for the most part, I think the armor stats are a lot more balanced now. Definitely a lot of them are a lot more interesting and important, whereas before, like, resilience was like the sun and all the other stats orbited around resilience. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Love you guys, and yeah, I'll probably not make any more videos until I move, because I do not want to make any more videos in a den with a lot of echo and background noise. Goodbye.